Hey, I'm Hunter from SkillThrive, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through several examples of how to center things in CSS Flexbox so you can better tackle your own projects. So there's more ways than ever in order to center things in CSS. And when I was first learning CSS, some of the tutorials and videos that I came across really just talked about some of the high level things that you can do and some of the concepts. And when I was first learning, I'm like, oh, this is really simple. And when I was applying it to my real world projects, I quickly found out that there's a lot of different nuances and things to consider when you're using each example. So that's why I wanted to focus specifically on Flexbox and talk about all the different types of ways you can center things in Flexbox. So before we jump in, I do want to quickly talk about the HTML and how I have this set up. So on each of these examples, I have this wrapper, which is this dark gray square rectangle. And then inside them, I have boxes. In some of the examples, I just have a single item, and then some of them I have multiple items. Now, the reason I have box 2 and box 3 as smaller sizes is to show you how these items are going to align to each other once we apply these properties. And this, I follow this concept all the way through until I get to the nested examples at the bottom. And here, instead of having the wrapper and then the boxes inside of it, I have this other container, which is holding the boxes inside of it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set display flex to the wrapper as well as the container to show you how you can get different styles when you're nesting Flexbox. All right, so now that we talked about the HTML and how that's set up, let's go ahead and jump into wrapper 1 example, which is our first 2 here, and show you how we can center things horizontally. So right now, I'm actually going to go ahead and uncomment this. And you can see here the first value that I have set is display flex. Now, in order to use Flexbox, you have to make sure you set display flex first, or these properties aren't going to do anything. They're not going to have any effect. And the next thing we have set here is flex direction. Now, I actually didn't need to, set this. I could actually remove it, and Flexbox is going to set the default flex direction to row. Now, the reason I'm actually explicitly saying this here is just so it's clear that this is what's being applied. Now, another thing quickly to talk about is when I have flex direction set to row, here you can see on the multiple items that it's very clear that things are going to be aligned left to right. Now, later on, I'm going to talk about flex direction column, which is going to align things top to bottom. But for now, we're going to focus on flex direction row. All right, so in order to align things horizontally, we set justify content to center. So let's go ahead and save that. And now you can see that both examples are now horizontally centered. Super easy. So let's come down to the next example here, which is using the wrapper 2 style. And again, we have flex direction to row, and this time we want to center it vertically. In order to do that, we use align items and set it to center. And also notice the behavior here on this multiple items. You can see now, because we have these centered vertically and the flex direction is row, that they're also centered relative to one another, which is something really important to understand and note for your projects. All right, so what if we want to center it horizontally and vertically? Well, all we need to do is we need to just set align items and justify content both to center. So let's just go ahead and uncomment this out. And we can save that. And now we can see that the next example here for the wrapper 3, they're both centered horizontally and vertically. All right, so now that we covered flex direction row, let's go ahead and talk about flex direction column. So I'm going to scroll down here to my next examples, and I'm just going to uncomment the flex direction before I apply the align items property, and keep an eye out on this multiple items example. So if we save that, you can see now instead of left to right, they're now stacked from top to bottom. And in order to align items horizontally when the flex direction is column, we set it to align items equals center. So if we save that, you'll see now that they're aligned horizontally. Now this is, you might have noticed that this is the opposite value of when flex direction was row. So on that, we use justify content as center, but now because we actually set this to column, we use align items. So you might have already figured this out, but now once we use flex direction columns, in order to center something vertically, we set it to justify content. So let's go ahead and save that. And now you can see that these are now centered vertically. All right, so now in order to center them horizontally and vertically, when the flex direction is column, it's the same thing for row. We set justify content to center and align items to center. So let's go ahead and save that. And now you can see the example of these being centered horizontally and vertically. All right, so that's just the basic concepts. Let's go ahead now and talk about Flexbox align self. Now, before we were applying these styles to the parent div, and these styles are being applied to the children. But with align self, we actually set these styles to the actual children itself in order to align self that child. So you can see here that on this first example, I'm still declaring Flexbox on the parent, but you can see here that I am targeting the div child of this wrapper 7, and then setting align self to center. So let's go ahead and save that. And remember, because we're not explicitly defining flex direction, it's assumed that flex direction is row. So once we apply self to a child when the parent is flex direction row, it's going to center it vertically. So let's move on to when flex direction is column, and let's go ahead and set align self here to this example as well. And in this case, you'll see that it's going to center horizontally. Cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is setting things to reverse, row reverse as well as column reverse. So the first example here, I'm going to have flex direction equal to row reverse and justify content to center. So let's go ahead and save that. And you can see now that it's essentially the same thing, just the row is reversed, right? So instead of the first div being on the left and then going to the right, the first div is going to be on the right and moving to the left. So now let's move on to the next example when we have flex direction row reverse. So let's go ahead and just save that so it's very clear what's going on. So you can see now that it's going to move all the way over to the right. And once we set align items to center, you can see now that it's centered vertically, but now it's all the way over to the right because we set row reverse. Cool. So you can see here where I was really talking about at the beginning of this video that, you know, it's easy, but it's also, there's some different nuances that are really cool in order to get different effects. So I hope this is really helpful so far. All right, so now let's go ahead and move on to our next examples, which are going to set flex direction column reverse. So let's just go ahead and uncomment the flex direction column reverse before we set the align items. And let's go ahead and save that. And you can now see that this is what the column reverse styles look like. So let's go ahead now and apply an align item center to this. So if we set that, oh, we have a typo. We can see now that it is horizontally aligned, but now, you know, the row is at the bottom here, and it's also reversed. So the big one's no longer at the top, it's at the bottom, and it's also a little bit of a different behavior than what we were getting when they were at the top, when column was just set to column. All right, so I know these are a lot of different examples, but these are ones you could come across in your projects. So let's go ahead and chug on. There's only 3 left to go. So the next one we have flex direction column reverse. So again, just as a reminder, let's go ahead and just show you what that looks like without justify content to center. Now let's go ahead and set justify content to center. And you can see now how this is behaving once we set column to reverse. All right, so now let's go ahead and move on to the nested examples. Now the first example, I'm actually setting flex direction to column. So let's go ahead and save that. So that might seem a little weird because once we were applying flex direction column to the wrappers above, it was making these stack from on top of each other. And the reason that's not happening is because now this wrapper is those styles are being applied to this container, and then we can use the flex within this container in order to have these boxes behave with Flexbox. So let's go ahead and apply the align items here, center to this wrapper. And then we can set the aligns item center to this lighter gray here in order to change the behavior of the boxes. So once we save that, we can now see that they're aligned, centered to one another because it's relative to this this darker container here. All right, so the last example here is another nested example. So let's go ahead and set align items to center here. And because we're not explicitly calling this, remember flex direction is going to be set to row. All right, so we can see how that behavior has changed. And now let's go ahead and set flex direction to column for this inside rectangle and set align items to center. Cool. So now you can see now that these boxes are stacked on top of each other because we have flex direction to column, and they're also going to be centered on one another because we have align items set to center. So I know I covered a lot of different examples here, and trust me, I'm still just skimming the top. There's going to be a lot of different situations that you come across in your real world projects, and having a good understanding of how Flexbox works, specifically how centering works in Flexbox, is really going to help you tackle different situations. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and be sure to check out our other design and development courses on our YouTube channel and on skillthrive.com. Again, I'm Hunter from SkillThrive, and I'll see you in the next video.